something extraordinary in your life, the enemy will try to make you believe that nothing is happening. But faith is not about what you see, it is about what you believe. Faith is trusting that when God speaks, His word will not return void. The Israelites were trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army, and to the natural eye, it looked like their end had come. But God was setting them up for a divine intervention that no one could have expected. You must understand that before every major breakthrough, there is always a period of intense pressure. This is why so many people give up right before their miracle arrives. They become weary in the waiting. They begin to doubt the promises of God. But let me remind you, God's delay is not His denial. What He has spoken over your life will come to pass, no matter how impossible it may seem. In Genesis, Joseph had dreams of greatness. But before he could step into his destiny, he was betrayed, enslaved, falsely accused, and imprisoned. It looked like everything was working against him. But in the unseen realm, God was orchestrating a moment that would take Joseph from the prison to the palace in a single day. Do you think God has forgotten you? Do you think your prayers have gone unheard? The very fact that you are facing resistance is proof that something is about to shift in your life. The enemy does not attack what does not threaten him. The reason you have been under pressure is that you are carrying something valuable. The reason you have been experiencing delays is that your destiny is too great to be rushed. God is working behind the scenes, and when the time is right, what He has for you will be revealed in ways you never expected. The Bible tells us in Isaiah 43:19, "See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it?" The problem is not that God is not moving. The problem is that we often fail to recognize His hand in the process. We expect the breakthrough to come in one way, but God has a different strategy. Elijah prayed for rain and his servant saw nothing the first 6 times. But on the 7th time, there was a cloud as small as a man's hand. And that tiny sign was all the proof Elijah needed to know that the heavens were about to open. Sometimes, the sign you are waiting for is already in front of you, but because it does not look the way you expected, you overlook it. God's promises are not empty words. When He says He will make a way in the wilderness, He means it. When He says He will open doors that no man can shut, He means it. But here is where many people miss it. They allow discouragement to rob them of their faith. They start believing the lies of the enemy more than the truth of God's word. Do not let temporary circumstances cause you to lose sight of the eternal promises of God. Do not let the waiting period make you forget that God is faithful to complete what He started. Your breakthrough is closer than you think, but you must hold on. You must refuse to quit. The woman with the issue of blood pressed through the crowd because she knew that if she could just touch the hem of Jesus' garment, she would be healed. Her miracle was not in the crowd, it was in her persistence. What if she had given up? What if she had decided that the crowd was too big, the struggle too great, the pain too unbearable? She would have missed her moment. This is why you cannot give up now. This is why you cannot allow discouragement to consume you. God is setting things in order. He is aligning circumstances. He is shifting things in your favor. The delay you are experiencing is not a denial, it is preparation. David was anointed to be king, but he spent years in the wilderness before he ever sat on the throne. The process was necessary. The struggle was part of the preparation. But when the appointed time came, nothing could stop what God had already ordained. You must understand that what you are facing today is not the final chapter. It is not the end of the story. If you could see what God is about to do, you would not be worried. You would not be anxious. You would not be fearful. You would be praising Him in advance. Because when God decides to move, no enemy, no delay, no opposition can stop Him. Some of you are at the edge of your breakthrough, but the enemy is trying to convince you to turn back. Do not fall for his deception. Do not listen to the voice of doubt. This is the moment when you must stand firm in faith, because what God is about to do in your life will be so great that no one will be able to deny His hand upon you. So keep pressing, keep believing, keep standing. Your breakthrough is closer than you think. The challenges you face today are not random. They are strategically allowed by God to prepare you for what is coming. Every tear you have cried, every disappointment you have endured, and every delay you have experienced is shaping you into the person you need to be for the next season of your life. God does not waste pain. He does not allow difficulties without a purpose. The very thing that seems to be breaking you is actually building you. The very obstacle that seems impossible is the doorway to your breakthrough. But you must hold on. You must trust that God is working even when you cannot see it. Faith is not about seeing, it is about believing that what God has promised will come to pass, no matter how long it takes. Think about the story of Abraham. God promised him descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, yet he and Sarah were childless for years. Every day that passed must have felt like a reminder of what they did not have. But God's timing is perfect. When the time was right, Sarah conceived, and Isaac was born. The waiting was not a punishment, it was preparation. God was building their faith, teaching them to trust him even when the evidence seemed to contradict his promise. And when the breakthrough finally came, it was beyond anything they could have imagined. Right now, some of you are standing in that waiting season. You have prayed, you have believed, and yet nothing seems to be happening. But I want you to know that just because you cannot see it does not mean God is not moving. Behind the scenes, he is aligning the right people, opening the right doors, and preparing the right opportunities. And when the time is right, what he has for you will be released. The enemy wants you to believe that nothing is happening so that you will give up before your breakthrough arrives. But do not fall for his lies. The delay is not a sign that God has forgotten you. It is a sign that he is preparing something greater than you can imagine. When God is about to do something significant in your life, the enemy will try to discourage you with fear, doubt, and frustration. He knows that if he can get you to quit, he can prevent you from stepping into what God has prepared for you. But you must stand firm. The Bible tells us in Galatians 6:9, "Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." The key is not to quit. The breakthrough is often just beyond the point where most people give up. This is why persistence is so important. Faith is not about seeing immediate results. It is about trusting that God is working even when you cannot see any evidence of it. Look at the story of Daniel. He prayed and fasted for 21 days, seeking an answer from God. It seemed like nothing was happening, but what Daniel did not know was that from the very first day he prayed, God had already sent the answer. The angel who was bringing the answer was delayed by spiritual warfare in the heavenly realms. But because Daniel did not give up, the breakthrough came. What if Daniel had stopped praying on the 20th day? What if he had given up just one day before his breakthrough arrived? He would have missed the answer that God had already released. This is why you must not give up now. The fact that you feel the pressure, the fact that you are facing opposition, is proof that something is about to break. The enemy does not attack what is not a threat. The reason you are experiencing resistance is that you are on the verge of stepping into something greater. Every attack is an indication that your breakthrough is closer than you think. Do not let the enemy steal what God has promised you. Do not let fear and doubt rob you of your destiny. God has not brought you this far to leave you now. He is faithful to complete what he started. Sometimes the greatest breakthroughs come when we least expect them. Peter and the other disciples had fished all night and caught nothing. They were tired, frustrated, and ready to give up. But then Jesus told them to cast their nets one more time. In the natural, it did not make sense. They had already tried and failed. But when they obeyed, the nets were so full of fish that they began to break. The difference was that this time, they were operating under the direction of Jesus. One act of obedience turned their entire situation around. This is why you must keep going, even when it does not make sense. Even when you feel like you have tried everything and nothing has worked. Sometimes God allows us to reach the end of our strength so that we will rely on his strength. Sometimes he allows us to exhaust all our options so that when the breakthrough comes, we will know that it was his hand, not our efforts, that made it happen. This is why you cannot give up. The very moment when it seems the hardest is often the moment right before the breakthrough. The enemy knows this, which is why he tries to discourage you the most when you are closest to your victory. Think about the walls of Jericho. God told Joshua and the Israelites to march around the city for 7 days. From a human perspective, it made no sense. How could walking around walls bring them down? But God's ways are not our ways. Each day they marched, nothing happened. But they kept going because they believed that what God had promised would come to pass. On the 7th day, after marching around the walls 7 times, they shouted, and the walls collapsed. What if they had stopped on the 6th day? What if they had given up just before the breakthrough? They would have missed the victory that God had already prepared for them. This is why you must keep believing even when nothing seems to be changing. God's timing is perfect. When the breakthrough comes, it will happen so suddenly that you will look back and realize that everything you went through was necessary to prepare you for that moment. Joseph went from the prison to the palace in a single day. The Israelites went from slaves to free people overnight. Peter went from catching nothing to having an overflowing catch in an instant. When God moves, he moves suddenly, but you must be ready. You must be in position. You must not give up before your moment arrives. Right now, heaven is aligning things in your favor. The people you need to meet, the doors that need to open, and the resources you need are all being arranged. You may not see it yet, but that does not mean it is not happening. Faith is believing that God is working even when you cannot see any evidence of it. It is trusting that what he has promised will come to pass no matter how long it takes. And when the breakthrough comes, it will happen so quickly that you will know it was only by the hand of God. The enemy wants you to believe that nothing is happening so that you will give up before the breakthrough arrives. But do not fall for his lies. The very fact that you are experiencing resistance is proof that something is about to shift. The pressure you feel is not a sign that you are failing. It is a sign that you are on the verge of a breakthrough. When a woman is about to give birth, the pain intensifies right before the delivery. The same is true in the spiritual realm. The greatest pressure often comes right before the greatest breakthrough. God is not limited by your circumstances. He is not bound by what you see or what others say. When he speaks, things shift. When he moves, mountains crumble. When he decides that it is your time, nothing can stop it. But you must hold on. You must keep believing. You must refuse to give up, no matter how long it takes. Because when the breakthrough comes, it will be greater than anything you could have imagined. The Bible says in Habakkuk 2:3, "For the vision is yet for an appointed time. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come." God's timing is perfect. What he has promised will come to pass. It may not happen when you expect it, and it may not happen how you expect it, but when it happens, you will know that it was only by the hand of God. And when that moment comes, all the waiting, all the tears, and all the struggles will make sense. You will see that God was not delaying your breakthrough. He was preparing you for it. So do not give up now. Do not quit when you are this close. The enemy is trying to convince you that nothing is happening, but the very fact that you feel this pressure is proof that something is about to break. Hold on, because your breakthrough is closer than you think. When you are standing on the brink of breakthrough, the noise of doubt becomes louder. The enemy knows that if he can fill your mind with fear and confusion, he can stop you from stepping into what God has prepared for you. But this is the moment when your faith must rise above the noise. The Bible says in Isaiah 41:10, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." God is not only aware of what you are facing, he is standing right beside you, holding you up when you feel like you cannot go any further. The pressure you feel is not a sign of defeat. It is the evidence that you are on the verge of victory. The enemy would not fight so hard if there was not something significant on the other side of this battle. Think about the moment when David faced Goliath. The odds were stacked against him. Goliath was bigger, stronger, and more experienced. But David did not rely on his own strength. He trusted in the power of God. He knew that God had delivered him from the lion and the bear, and he would deliver him from Goliath as well. When David stepped onto the battlefield, he was not intimidated by the size of his enemy because he knew the size of his God. With one stone, David brought down the giant, and his breakthrough opened the door to his destiny. What if David had given in to fear? What if he had believed the voices that told him he was too small, too young, or too inexperienced? He would have missed the moment that defined his future. Right now, some of you are facing giants in your life. Giants of fear, doubt, and uncertainty. Giants of financial struggle, health issues, and broken relationships. The enemy wants you to believe that these giants are too big, that the obstacles are too great, and that the breakthrough will never come. But I want you to know that the same God who gave David the victory is the same God who is fighting for you. The same power that brought down Goliath is the same power that will bring down every obstacle standing in your way. All you need is faith the size of a mustard seed, and mountains will move. But faith requires action. It is not enough to believe in your heart. You must step out in obedience even when it does not make sense. Peter experienced this when he stepped out of the boat and walked on water. As long as his eyes were fixed on Jesus, he defied the laws of nature. But the moment he focused on the wind and the waves, he began to sink. The enemy wants to distract you with the storm, but you must keep your eyes on the one who has the power to calm it. Do not let fear pull you under. Do not let doubt steal what God has promised you. The breakthrough is on the other side of your obedience. There are moments in life when God will ask you to step out in faith, even when the timing seems wrong and the circumstances seem impossible. This is where many people miss their breakthrough. They wait for the perfect conditions, not realizing that God often moves in the most unlikely situations. When Peter and the other disciples had fished all night without catching anything, they were ready to give up. But Jesus told them to go out into the deep and let down their nets again. In the natural, it made no sense, but when they obeyed, their nets were so full that they began to break. The key was obedience in the face of failure. Right now, God is asking some of you to try again. You have prayed, believed, and stepped out in faith, but nothing has happened. The temptation is to quit, to believe that maybe it was not meant to be, but God is saying, go deeper, trust me one more time. Your breakthrough is waiting in the deep places where your faith is stretched and your trust is tested. Do not let past failures keep you from future blessings. Just because it did not happen before does not mean it will not happen now. God's timing is perfect, and when He says it is time, nothing can stop it. Think about Joseph. God gave him a dream of greatness, but instead of seeing that dream fulfilled immediately, Joseph faced betrayal, slavery, and prison. For years, it seemed like his life was moving in the opposite direction of the promise. But what Joseph did not know was that every setback was positioning him for his breakthrough. When the time was right, he was elevated from the prison to the palace in a single day. The years of waiting were not wasted. They were preparing him to handle the responsibility that came with the breakthrough. If Joseph had given up in the prison, he would have missed the palace. Some of you feel like you are in a prison of circumstances right now. It seems like no matter how hard you try, you cannot move forward. But I want you to know that God has not forgotten you. The delay is not a denial, it is preparation. God is developing the character, strength, and wisdom you will need when the breakthrough comes. If He gave it to you too soon, you would not be ready to sustain it. The waiting season is where God strengthens your faith, sharpens your vision, and teaches you to rely on Him completely. Do not despise this season. It is the foundation for what is coming next. God's process often involves seasons of hiddenness. Before David became king, he spent years tending sheep in obscurity. Before Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, he spent 40 years in the wilderness. Before Jesus began his public ministry, he spent 30 years preparing in private.